Picture yourself standing on London Bridge in the year 1600. The River Thames flows beneath you, dark and busy, crowded with wherries and barges carrying wool, wine, and passengers. The city spreads before you, a maze of narrow streets and timber-framed houses crammed within ancient Roman walls. Church spires pierce the sky, over 100 of them, and the great Gothic mass of old St. Paul's Cathedral dominates the western skyline. This is London at the dawn of a new century, home to roughly 200,000 souls, already the largest city in England, already a place where fortunes are made and lost, where kings are challenged and sometimes lose their heads. The Stuart monarchs rule from Westminster, but the City of London, that square mile of merchants and guilds, guards its independence fiercely. In the Globe Theatre across the river, Shakespeare's company performs for packed crowds, giving voice to the ambitions and anxieties of an age. Coffee has not yet arrived, but ale flows freely in countless taverns where men debate religion, politics, and trade. Life expectancy hovers around 35 years, and disease is a constant companion, lurking in the open sewers, in the crowded tenements, in the rats that scurry through every alley. Then comes 1642, and civil war tears England apart. London sides with Parliament against King Charles I. 7 years later, the unthinkable happens. The king himself is executed at Whitehall, and for 11 years, England experiments with republican rule. The monarchy returns in 1660, but relief is short-lived. In 1665, bubonic plague sweeps through the city, claiming nearly 100,000 lives in a single terrible year. Londoners who can afford to flee do so. Those who cannot remain, waiting, praying, dying. By the autumn of 1666, the worst seems over. But fate has one more catastrophe in store, and it will arrive not as sickness, but as fire. It begins in Pudding Lane in the early hours of September 2nd, 1666, in a baker's oven that was not properly extinguished. Within hours, flames leap from house to house, feeding on timber and thatch, driven by fierce easterly winds. For 4 days, the Great Fire of London rages unchecked, consuming over 13,000 houses, 87 parish churches, and the old medieval St. Paul's. Miraculously, fewer than 10 people are recorded among those who lost their lives, but 400 acres of the city lie in smoking ruins, and 100,000 Londoners find themselves homeless, camping in the fields beyond the walls. Yet, from this devastation comes opportunity. King Charles II appoints Sir Christopher Wren to rebuild, and Wren rises to the challenge magnificently. His masterpiece, the new St. Paul's Cathedral, takes 35 years to complete, its great dome becoming the defining symbol of London's resurrection. The city that rises from the ashes is different, better in many ways, built now of brick and stone rather than wood, with wider streets and stricter building codes. Coffee houses multiply across the city, becoming vital centers of commerce and conversation, and one of them, Lloyd's Coffee House, will eventually grow into the world's greatest insurance market. In 1688, the Glorious Revolution brings William and Mary to the throne, establishing parliamentary supremacy once and for all. 6 years later, in 1694, the Bank of England is founded to finance war against France, and London begins its long rise as the financial capital of the world. The century ends with a city transformed, its population climbing toward 600,000, its merchant ships sailing to every corner of the globe. The age of empire is dawning, and London stands ready to become its beating heart. Across the ocean, American colonies are growing too, and their fate will soon intertwine with this ambitious, restless, ever-expanding city. And so London enters the 18th century as a city of contradictions, a place where elegance and squalor exist side by side, separated sometimes by nothing more than a single street. The new Georgian monarchs, arriving from Hanover in 1714, bring with them a taste for order and symmetry, and the city responds by expanding westward into graceful squares lined with uniform townhouses, their red brick facades and white sash windows becoming the very image of English respectability. Mayfair, Bloomsbury, Soho, these neighborhoods rise from farmland and marshes to house the merchants, lawyers, and aristocrats who are profiting handsomely from Britain's expanding empire, an empire built on sugar from the Caribbean, tobacco from Virginia, tea from China, and the forced labor of enslaved Africans transported across the Atlantic by the hundreds of thousands. The wealth pouring into London is staggering, and it shows. Handel composes his operas and oratorios for audiences in Hanover Square, coffee houses evolve into exclusive gentlemen's clubs, and the great literary figure Samuel Johnson compiles his famous dictionary, declaring that, when a man is tired of London, he is tired of life. Yet, walk a few blocks east, and you enter a different world entirely, one captured unforgettably by the artist William Hogarth in his prints depicting Gin Lane, where cheap spirits have created an epidemic of addiction among the poor, where mothers neglect their children for another drink, where desperation is sold by the glass for a penny. By mid-century, Londoners are consuming 11 million gallons of gin per year, and the city's population, now approaching 750,000, includes countless souls living in conditions of unimaginable poverty. But change is coming, a revolution not of politics, but of industry, and it will transform not just London, but the entire world. The revolution begins not in London itself, but in the mills and mines of the Midlands and the North. Yet its effects reshape the capital profoundly and permanently. Steam power, mechanized production, and an insatiable hunger for raw materials and markets turn Britain into the workshop of the world, and London becomes its warehouse, its counting house, its command center. The great enclosed docks of the East End, beginning with the West India Docks in 1800, transformed the Thames into the busiest waterway on Earth, handling goods from every continent, employing tens of thousands of dockers, coopers, and clerks. The city's population explodes, crossing 1 million by 1800 and reaching 2 million by 1830, a growth rate unprecedented in human history, fed by migrants from the English countryside, from Ireland, from across Europe, all seeking opportunity in the great metropolis. Gaslighting arrives in 1812, and suddenly London's streets glow after dark, transforming night into a navigable extension of day. The architect John Nash redesigns the West End for the Prince Regent, creating Regent Street and Regent's Park, laying out grand processional routes that speak of imperial confidence and ambition. In 1815, news arrives of victory at Waterloo, and Admiral Nelson's column will eventually rise in the newly designed Trafalgar Square to commemorate British naval supremacy. Yet these triumphs mask deep social tensions, as workers displaced by machines and impoverished by economic cycles begin demanding political reform, and radicals whisper of revolution. Then, in 1837, King William IV passes away, and an 18-year-old princess named Victoria ascends to the throne. She will reign for 63 years, and under her rule, London will become something the world has never seen before. A city of 6 million souls, the capital of an empire spanning a quarter of the globe. The The young queen gives her name to an age, and what an age it becomes. Victorian London grows at a pace that defies comprehension, swelling from 2 million inhabitants when Victoria takes the throne to 6.5 million when she departs it 63 years later, making it by far the largest city the world has ever known, larger than ancient Rome at its peak, larger than Beijing or Paris, a metropolis so vast that a person could walk for hours and never reach its edge. The Great Exhibition of 1851 announces Britain's industrial supremacy to the world, housed in Joseph Paxton's Crystal Palace, a cathedral of glass and iron in Hyde Park that welcomes 6 million visitors in just 5 months, showcasing 14,000 exhibitors from around the globe, a celebration of progress and possibility that fills Londoners with justifiable pride. Yet progress comes at a terrible cost. The same city that builds Crystal Palace also contains rookeries where families of 10 share single rooms, where children labor in factories from age 5, where the River Thames becomes so polluted with sewage that the summer of 1858 is remembered forever as the Great Stink, forcing Parliament itself to hang lime-soaked curtains in its windows to mask the unbearable odor. Cholera sweeps through the slums repeatedly, claiming tens of thousands, until the engineer Joseph Bazalgette constructs his masterpiece, over 1,000 miles of underground sewers that redirect the city's waste downstream and transform public health forever. In 1863, the Metropolitan Railway opens between Paddington and Farringdon, the first underground passenger railway in human history, and Londoners descend into gaslit tunnels to travel beneath the streets they once walked. Tower Bridge rises in 1894. Big Ben has been chiming the hours since 1859, and the red pillar boxes and black hansom cabs give Victorian London its distinctive character. When Victoria finally passes in January 1901, an era ends, and her subjects wonder anxiously what the new century will bring. The new century begins in mourning, but soon quickens with change. Electric trams replace horse-drawn omnibuses, automobiles appear on streets designed for carriages, and in 1903, suffragettes begin their long campaign for women's right to vote, marching through London, chaining themselves to railings, enduring imprisonment and force-feeding, refusing to be silenced until victory finally comes in 1918. That same year brings the end of a conflict that has shattered European civilization, the Great War claiming nearly 1 million British lives, transforming London into a city of widows and wounded veterans, of empty chairs at family tables, of memorials rising in every borough to honor the fallen. The 1920s roar briefly with jazz and optimism. The 1930s bring economic hardship and the growing shadow of fascism on the continent. And then in September 1940, the bombs begin to fall. For 57 consecutive nights, German aircraft rain destruction on London, and the Blitz continues sporadically for 8 months, reducing entire neighborhoods to rubble, claiming over 30,000 civilian lives across Britain, testing the city's spirit as nothing has tested it before. Londoners shelter in underground stations, emerging each morning to find familiar landmarks vanished overnight. Yet they carry on, queuing for rations, clearing debris, refusing to surrender. Prime Minister Winston Churchill captures their defiance perfectly when he declares, "We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be." When victory finally arrives in May 1945, crowds flood the streets around Buckingham Palace, cheering, weeping, embracing strangers, celebrating survival. But the city they have saved lies exhausted and broken, and the empire that made it great is already beginning to dissolve. A new London must now be built from the ruins. From the rubble rises not just a rebuilt city, but an entirely new social contract. The Labour government, elected in 1945, creates the National Health Service in 1948, promising free health care to every citizen from cradle to grave, and across London vast housing estates rise to replace the slums and bomb sites, concrete towers and planned communities offering indoor plumbing and central heating to families who had never known such luxuries. The Festival of Britain opens on the South Bank in 1951, exactly 1 century after the Great Exhibition, its modernist pavilions and the iconic skyline sculpture declaring that Britain, though diminished, still looks forward with hope and creativity. But the most profound transformation comes from beyond British shores. In June 1948, the ship Empire Windrush docks at Tilbury, carrying 492 passengers from Jamaica. The first wave of what will become mass immigration from the Caribbean, from India and Pakistan, from Africa and Asia, forever changing the face, the sounds, and the flavors of London. By the 1960s, the city pulses with new energy, and young people from around the world flock to witness what magazines call swinging London, where the Beatles and the Rolling Stones revolutionize popular music, where Mary Quant invents the miniskirt on King's Road, where Carnaby Street becomes synonymous with youth culture and liberation. The old imperial capital is becoming something new, something multicultural and modern, though tensions simmer beneath the surface, and the optimism of the 60s will soon give way to harder times. The 1970s arrive like a hangover after a party, bringing oil crises, inflation, strikes, and power cuts that leave London literally in darkness. The winter of 1978 to 79 becomes known as the Winter of Discontent, with rubbish piling uncollected in Leicester Square, and union disputes paralyzing essential services. Into this chaos steps Margaret Thatcher, Britain's first female prime minister, elected in 1979 with a mandate to transform the nation's economy. Her policies prove deeply divisive, celebrated by some as necessary modernization, condemned by others as an assault on working communities, and London itself becomes a symbol of this divide, with the wealthy enclaves of the West End prospering while industrial areas suffer devastating job losses. Yet from decline comes reinvention. The abandoned docklands of the East End, derelict since containerization killed the old port, are reborn as Canary Wharf, a glittering complex of skyscrapers that rivals the ancient city as a financial center. The Big Bang of 1986 deregulates the stock exchange, and London emerges as the undisputed financial capital of Europe, attracting banks and traders from every continent. The Channel Tunnel opens in 1994, connecting London to Paris by rail for the first time in history. Princess Diana's passing in 1997 triggers an unprecedented outpouring of public grief, revealing depths of emotion that surprise even Londoners themselves. And on the final night of 1999, millions gather along the Thames to watch fireworks explode over the newly constructed Millennium Dome, celebrating the arrival of a new century, uncertain what it will bring, but ready to face it. The new millennium finds London confident and cosmopolitan, a city where over 300 languages are spoken daily, where a person can eat breakfast in an Ethiopian cafe, lunch at a Polish deli, and dinner in a Bangladeshi curry house, all without leaving a single borough. The population surges past 8 million for the first time since the 1950s, drawn by opportunity, culture, and the magnetic pull of one of Earth's truly global cities. The Tate Modern opens in a converted power station on the South Bank in 2000, instantly becoming one of the world's most visited museums, and the skyline begins its dramatic vertical transformation as developers race to build ever taller towers in a city historically defined by low-rise streets. In July 2005, a coordinated security incident on the Underground and a bus in Tavistock Square brings tragedy to the morning commute, claiming 52 innocent lives and reminding Londoners that their open, tolerant city remains vulnerable to those who despise such values. Yet London responds not with fear, but with resilience. And 7 years later, in the summer of 2012, the Olympic Games arrive in the East End, transforming derelict industrial land into the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, showcasing British creativity in a dazzling opening ceremony directed by Danny Boyle, and proving that London can still astonish the world. The Shard rises over London Bridge, becoming Western Europe's tallest building at 310 meters. But political storms are gathering. In June 2016, Britain votes narrowly to leave the European Union, though London itself votes overwhelmingly to remain, revealing a profound divide between the capital and much of the nation it supposedly leads. Then comes the Great Silence. In March 2020, as a global health crisis sweeps across continents, London experiences something unprecedented in its modern history. Streets emptied of traffic, theaters dark, pubs shuttered, the mighty city brought to a standstill by an invisible threat. For months, Londoners adapt to a strange new reality of remote work, video calls, and socially distanced queues outside supermarkets. Piccadilly Circus, normally thronged with tourists, stands eerily deserted. Yet even in isolation, the city's spirit endures, with residents applauding healthcare workers from their doorsteps every Thursday evening. A weekly ritual of gratitude that echoes through silent neighborhoods. Recovery comes gradually, and with it, transformation. Bicycle lanes expand across the city as commuters abandon crowded trains for two wheels. Offices reimagine themselves for hybrid work patterns, and residential neighborhoods see new life as people no longer need to commute daily. The Elizabeth Line finally opens in 2022, a 100-kilometer railway crossing London from east to west, the largest infrastructure project in European history. In May 2023, King Charles III is crowned at Westminster Abbey, the first coronation in 70 years, connecting ancient pageantry to a thoroughly modern city. And as we approach 2026, London faces its future with characteristic pragmatism, confronting challenges of climate change, housing affordability, and social inequality, yet remaining what it has been for over 4 centuries, a city of reinvention, of resilience, of relentless forward motion. From the ashes of 1666 to the uncertainties of today, London endures, adapts, and dreams of tomorrow.